Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, John Shulman. John is an internationally known expert and public speaker on negotiation and sales effectiveness, and is trained and consulted with thousands of leaders and professionals from dozens of large organizations throughout the United States and internationally. He is also a co-founder of Alignor, a sales training and consulting firm that specializes in helping organizations implement negotiation and sales best practices through interactive learning games, tools, and methodologies. So with that, John, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Nick. Thank you to everybody for joining today. I am extremely excited about this topic. Communicating value is always difficult in my experience. It's never just easy, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. But these days, it's harder than ever. It's very tricky because what we find is, in this situation where there's so much uncertainty, customers are basically trying to figure out their way forward. There's a lot of risk aversion. There's a lot of sort of retrenching and protecting themselves, fear of making any decision right now. Basically, I'm seeing a lot of potential organization changes in various organizations, a lot going on. But the flip side is it's a great opportunity right now to work with our own people, because what I've found with the sales organizations that we work with, people are open to figuring out a better way right now. Everybody knows the same old stuff probably isn't going to work. We also see that, the customers are acting differently, and our sales organization, our people feel like they also need to be responsive to those changes. And we want to show our people that we're committed to them, that we're supporting them, that we're working with them. So I think it's a great opportunity right now. What I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover, and then we'll just jump in and have some fun with this. So first of all, we're going to look at what is value and why is it so difficult to communicate. We're going to look specifically at how buyers think about value. I'm going to share with you 6 steps that you can take to communicate value effectively. And we're going to look at some tools both to show the financial value to customers and also how we can train our people to communicate not only the financial value, but the total value package through compelling value stories. Finally, we're going to look at how you can actually use data to assess individually and team effectiveness in terms of what their strengths are and where some gaps are. And we'll have an opportunity to answer your questions. All right. So what the heck is value and how do we communicate it? First of all, our people need to know, and certainly we need to be clear with them, that value, our value proposition, does not communicate itself. Others have to perceive it or it's useless. So it's not enough for me to think what I'm offering is valuable. My customers have to see it. And obviously some of it can be quantified and put into dollars. Other aspects really cannot. And we'll talk about what those are. So fundamentally what we're looking at is how can we communicate so that our customers perceive it? And they're going to perceive value really in 2 ways. First of all, they want their organizational objectives, like their business objectives, to be met. And second, they want their own interests. And those interests can be either business related or sometimes actually personal interests to be satisfied. So we're going to look at both sides of it. Why do we need to do this? Because basically when people look at value, the people we're trying to sell to, they want their own interests to be satisfied and their objectives met, basically better by us than competition, or they're going to go to competition. So they're always looking at who can satisfy their overall interests the most effectively, either us or other alternatives, or in some cases, just deciding not to buy at all right now. So why is it so difficult? What are these challenges that we come across? And just so you know, we will be sending you the complete deck, this entire presentation, so you'll have all this information. Some pieces of this I'm going to go through kind of quickly. I have a lot of information, but I want you to have it afterward, and other pieces we're going to do a deeper dive on. So some of the challenges that we come across are, do we have the right tools? Do we have the right models? Are we dynamic in how we present? Maybe our people don't really have the skills. Maybe they're just not comfortable communicating, for example, financial models, or even worse, maybe they really don't even understand the true interests of our customers. Maybe they don't understand the business models of the customers. Sometimes we just have the wrong focus. So we might look at, our products and services, and we're super comfortable and confident about talking about our products or services, but it's not really about the value to the customer. Or we're talking to the wrong people and we're trying to convince them of things that they're just not going to agree with because of their position. Finally, sometimes we don't have the right relationships. Maybe we don't have the experience. We have people who kind of go through different buyers, they rotate through, or we just get blocked and we can't get to the decision makers we need to get to. So what we've got to do is we've got to make sure our people have the tools and training they need to overcome these challenges. And I want to look specifically at one type of challenge, which is around buyers and how buyers behave when it comes to value and value stories. First of all, and I should share with you, I have actually worked with and trained some of the largest buying organizations in the world. So I've had some real insights into how they see things. And the first thing I came across that really kind of shocked me is most buyers are really, really skeptical of your motives and your data when you're selling. And, it's based on their experience, and it's also, they're trained. They're literally trained to be skeptical, not to buy into whatever you're selling. They also have specific tactics that they use and processes that they use to increase their leverage or power over you. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too, what that means. And then, when we try to convince them about the overall value we can bring to their organization, part of the problem is they may not be measured. In fact, generally are not measured on that value. They're measured on things like cost savings or other factors, could be delivery timing, all kinds of other things other than the total value. And finally, they have key relationships, that's the buyers I'm talking about, internally that they have to protect to show their value. So these are people they often refer to as their customers. And when they say customers, if a buyer says customers, they're usually referring not to the organization's end customers, but to their own internal business partners who are in effect the customers of the buyer. So the buyer is trying to get the best value possible at the lowest cost, and then of course take credit for it internally. So these are all factors, and what the buyers love to do is use leverage. And leverage is kind of the enemy of value selling and communicating value. What is leverage? It's basically power. It's the ability to walk away. So if they can just say no and go to an alternative or not buy at all, that's power. So the thing about power and leverage, especially when we're selling and negotiating, it's not static. It doesn't stay the same. It's kind of going up and down all the time. And basically, everybody's evaluating at all times. So a buyer is always trying to figure out, do they need to deal with you, or should they look at competitors, or maybe just delay and not make a decision at all? And why is this so important? Because it has a huge impact on people's perception of value, on the results we get when we negotiate and sell, and also on the relationships, because when people use power all the time, it kind of erodes the relationships. So we want to find a way to deal with this when we come across it. And the kinds of things you're going to hear people say is, we need an answer now, or we don't agree with your data, or there's not enough information, all kinds of things they say. And what they're doing is really using tactics to increase their leverage. So we want people to be aware of this, to be ready for it. If we're, dealing with people who are cherry picking the data, maybe they're, misleading us, they're not giving us information that we really need to be able to communicate value. These are all things that can get in our way. And we've got to have a process, a systematic way to overcome that. And what we're going to call it is really selling value. So we've got 6 steps. I'm going to do a bit of a quick overview on the first 2, and then a deep dive on number 4. So the first 2 steps are really understanding how the customer perceives value, which is about their business objectives and stakeholder interests, as I mentioned at the outset. The second step is confirming our value differentiators, which is what aspects of our offering basically have a competitive advantage and satisfy the identified interests and objectives of the customers better than our competition. So those are the 2 we're going to focus on before we get to the main event, which is really how to communicate it. And then there are other pieces, like, if we can, tailoring our solution to the opportunity, handling objections, of course, and deciding whether we should basically walk away or stay firm, or maybe even modify our package as we make decisions. The deep dive we're going to do there is step 4, which is how to communicate our value stories to the targeted audiences so that they see how we satisfy their objectives and interests better than competition. All right, so let's look briefly at steps 1 and 2. The first one, when we try to understand how stakeholders perceive value, it's really about understanding their business model, how that impacts their interests and their objectives. And again, as I mentioned at the outset, they're going to look at it both in terms of identifiable business objectives that relate to the business model, but also their own interests. And those, again, can be business or personal interests. And what we've got to do is basically influence their decision-making so that they see value from us by our offering satisfying their interests and objectives in total more effectively than competition, and they're always going to weight it to what's most critical. So we got to know for each person we're dealing with, what do they really care about the most? Now, taking that idea in step 1 into step 2, we're going to look at, what are the buyer interests? We're going to be as specific as we can. It could be things like even leveraging competition, which I don't want them to do. Not something they care about, so I have to be aware of it. Or maybe they just want to manage their workload and basically stay within the norms of what's expected. I mean, we deal with that a lot, especially if you deal with government, by the way. You're going to find they always want to stay within the rules kind of thing. Maybe they even want to maintain certain relationships with certain suppliers. There can be so many different interests you come across. And what we've got to do with our value differentiators is figure out what elements, aspects, or attributes of our solution basically can satisfy those interests we identified and help the customer meet their objectives better than competition. So these are our competitive advantages. And some of it is going to be super easy to measure financially, and we're going to want spreadsheets and numbers to show them. And other pieces are less easy to sort of quantify, and certainly they don't go into financial modeling so well, like risk or relationships and reputations. So what we've got to do is make sure that our possible value differentiators do satisfy those interests. We've got to map them to the stakeholder interests that they satisfy, that we think they satisfy. So what are the kinds of value differentiators we might come across? Maybe we've got super high quality products, or, we're really good with technical expertise, or maybe we've got great product innovation. It could even be strong relationships. It could be a number of different things, again, that we know we're going to be better at than our competition, and that are going to satisfy identified interests of the customer. So what we do then is we just map them. We go from the value differentiators that we have identified, and for each different stakeholder within that customer, so it could be the buyer, could be operations, could be finance, different roles, people we're dealing with, engineers, who knows who it is, we got to make sure we're mapping the right value differentiators to the correct interests and objectives of those stakeholders in order to create compelling value stories. So I'm going to turn it over now to Brian from Leverage Point to share with you a tool that can help us quantify and capture some of this data, in particular financial data.
Great, thanks, John. So as Nick mentioned a little while ago, so Leverage Point is a cloud-based platform, and we help B2B organizations better communicate the economic impact that their offerings have on their customers' business. So what I'm about to show you is an example of a value story or value proposition, which we created. It's actually a fictitious company called Dean Chemicals. And what you're seeing right now is Leverage Point in my browser. So salespeople are able to log into the platform, and they can open up value stories that have been created by marketing with sometimes with the help of Leverage Point. And the value stories essentially help salespeople across the organization become more effective at communicating value, as John has been talking about. So imagine I'm a salesperson. I work for Dean Chemicals. We sell an advanced boiler technology that is used in manufacturing processes. We happen to be talking with a tire manufacturer at the current time. And maybe as I prepare for my conversations, I start to look at customizing my value story before I even have the first conversation around value. I want to demonstrate that I've done my homework with the customer, and as part of that process, I can start to make changes to the value story based on maybe some initial conversations I've had in preparation for my meetings. So this screen you see here is an assumption screen. It basically gives the salesperson an opportunity to start to customize that story. In fact, maybe I realize that in this part of the country, the price of natural gas has actually gone up, so I can make that change. Now, what we'll focus on in the value story, of course, are the key value drivers, as John has mentioned. And the story is set up to kind of have a comprehensive view of what are the things that a typical customer is concerned about or interested in terms of economic impact. And here's five of those for this particular one. Now, in an earlier conversation that we had with the customer, we started to walk through at a very high level what those value drivers are for maybe some of our other customers. And one of the things that they pointed out was their view of safety, while it's very important, is pretty common across all of the suppliers. So digging down into safety as a value driver may not be our best approach. So as we prepare for this meeting coming up, we actually decide to turn off the safety value driver. We're not going to really discuss that in these conversations coming up. So as I actually then start to have a conversation with the customer, I can start to make changes to the story based on who I'm speaking to. So again, same story, but now we're starting to customize it based on who we're going to talk to. And we'll begin talking with the director of operations. So again, I'll review the key value drivers with the director of operations, but I'll also comment that, you know, we've had a discussion about safety, and we realize that that might be not a differentiating factor for us. But I think we want to demonstrate we've done our homework as well. So then as we start to go through the value story, we start to make some claims. And based on what we know from other customers and based on what we've learned about this particular tire manufacturer, we think that there is over $500,000 in savings that we can provide if they upgrade their existing boiler technology to our newest offering. And this is the case that we want to make. So we start with some basic assumptions. And again, these can be changed, and we can even demonstrate our thinking. One of the most important parts of talking value is to be able to systematically explain how we approach the value thought process and explain our thinking, because prospects or customers, you know, they can always disagree with the numbers, but if they agree with your thought process, that gets you almost 90% of the way there. And then, you know, you can go back and forth with the numbers, but being able to systematically walk through your thinking with a prospect or with a customer actually makes them part of the process. So what you're really doing as you're changing this value story is you're going from a sort of a standard set of data and a template into what becomes a business case for why they should do business with you. And that's something that if you can get them to cooperate, then you're building that business case together. So what you'll see here now are 3 or 4 value drivers. And maybe in my conversation with the director of operations, he explains that they are locked into a labor contract, and their labor savings won't really be able to be experienced because of that locked-in labor contract. So we're actually going to go and turn that one off as well. So we have the ability to make changes as we go along. So we're going to turn off our labor value driver. And then now we're down to 3 value drivers, but there's still significant value here. So the next 3 screens actually dive into each one individually And again, these can be changed as well as we learn things about the customer as we're having the conversation. And of course, the value drivers are quantified. So I won't go through each one in specifics, but once we talk through all three, then we can start to do a summary. So here we have their current technology, and here we have the new technology. So what we're seeing here is an additional cost for over what they're paying today. So essentially, we're more expensive than what they're doing. But what we've done is made the case for why, if they invest more money over and above what they're paying today, they can actually see significant cost reductions across the board. So what this particular chart allows us to show is that an investment will bring back over $400,000 per year in savings to the company. So this is something that hopefully my director of operations, or ultimately my procurement person, can take and feel good about the decision that they're making to go forward with business with Dean Chemicals. So once I've made the changes, I can click a PDF or a PowerPoint. I can download this presentation and I can send this off to my prospect, hopefully moving my deal forward, getting me another meeting, but really demonstrating that I'm listening to what the customer is saying. I'm making changes to my conversation based on their input, and hopefully they're agreeing and working with me to develop what ultimately is going to be the business case to buy. So I will hand this back to John.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. That's pretty interesting. I'm thinking about, some of the folks I work with are super comfortable with the financial modeling and others are less so. But either way, what you've just presented is an extraordinarily important set of data that we've got to get in front of the customer. And we've got to do it in the right way, or all that work can kind of be squandered. So we got to figure out what is the right way to do it. And that's what we're going to focus on now. How do we communicate targeted value stories that will really be compelling? So that data that Brian just showed us, it's a great example of the kind of, when we know we can really create value for the customer, we've got to get it to them and get it to them in a persuasive way. And as Brian said, sometimes it can be even 90% of the battle, just having that dialogue about the right assumptions, the right modeling, because it gets them thinking about value as opposed to leverage, as I mentioned earlier, and power and control of the discussion. So now we're in a good place, but we got to communicate well. So it's not enough for us to run the models, for us to think we understand the differentiation that we have. The customer has got to accept it. And the way to get them to accept it is to make sure, first of all, that all those assumptions, the data that we have, as Brian was just showing you, that it fits with the buyer's expectations. It fits with their preferences for how information is communicated, and it fits with their models. So we're going to create targeted value stories that basically look at how we can show them the differentiated elements, aspects, or attributes of our offering that are going to satisfy their objectives and their interests better than competition. The key here, though, is we got to make sure they understand that we are speaking directly to their interests and their objectives. Okay, we want to do that. And then what's our best stuff? We want to put it first. We don't want to save the best for last. And we're going to share relevant, credible data where we have it that the customer can actually verify. So as Brian suggested, if we've got models, if we've got stuff we can leave behind after those conversations, better yet, because we're going to let them go take a look at it. So when we do that, we got to have the right skills. And what I'm going to do right now is actually take us into a training tool that we can use with our folks to help them basically get prepared and do the right kinds of conversations with their customers. And we're going to use an online scenario-based game. We have a bunch of them here with our Alignor Skills website. We're going to look in the sales negotiation area, specifically at a certification we have for the skills required for selling value. So we're going to look at how to sell value, and as you would expect, this is going to follow those 6 steps that I shared at the beginning. So we actually have a game for each of the 6 steps, and the game sets up a situation not unlike what Brian shared, where we've got to deal with the customer, we got various stakeholders, they're very realistic, and each game leads to the next. So we start out with understanding how the customer sees value, then we confirm our value differentiators, we tailor our solution, and now where we are is we target our message so the customer basically can see the value, the stakeholders there. So I'm going to play this game with you, and I'm going to do it as if I were the sales professional who's getting ready, who's making sure I'm ready to do this. And so I'll kind of talk you through my thought process as I look at it. One thing to share with you, depending on your bandwidth, you may see some lags and the audio may not be really clear as it goes through GoToMeeting. So I will read a lot of it where there's dialogue or there's words that typically there's audio on it. So here we go. Let's play this game and see how we can communicate value. All right. So I'm going to read the introduction first. It says, you are a member of a sales team that is introducing a new product at a premium price. Okay. For early adopters, you have created a tailored package that you have offered to one of your largest accounts, BigCo. BigCo's director of operations, Fred, confirmed that your early adopter package meets his needs. Okay, that's exciting. I'm excited. That's good news. Your package has a competitive advantage over any alternatives available to BigCo. Oh, you know what? I just played the wrong game. Sorry, I'm going back. That's handling objections. That's getting beyond where I was. Let me go back. We're going to target our message so the customer sees value. I thought this sounded too good to be true. All right, here we go. So we're back on targeting our message. We got to communicate the message first. All right. So you are a member of a sales team that is introducing a new product at a premium price. You're about to offer your new product to one of your largest accounts, BigCo. Linda, BigCo's buyer, who owns BigCo's relationships with all suppliers in your category, wants you to reduce the price of your new product. Yeah, I kind of figured this was where we were. All right, so she has developed a total cost model to help her get credit for reducing BigCo's costs. Other than cost, Linda cares about safety, makes sense, and environmental compliance. Fred, BigCo's director of operations, also cares about safety and environmental compliance and reducing costs, though he is locked into a labor contract that limits his ability to obtain labor cost savings. Okay, so the labor cost savings are not going to be good for him. Fred is concerned about the risk of manufacturing disruption if he tries your new product. With your new marketing team, you have identified value differentiators in your tailored solution for BigCo where you have a competitive advantage. Okay, so we've got some value differentiators. Let's see what they are. They include superior environmental compliance. Okay, that's good. Reduced fuel costs and extra technical support for BigCo to ensure efficiencies and avoid disruptions. Your channel partner representative, Madhu, has arranged a meeting for you to share your value story with BigCo. Madhu, whose organization will provide the extra technical support, asked you to respect her role in managing the relationship with BigCo. Okay, so Madhu wants to kind of be in charge. I know what Linda's after, I know what Fred's after, and I know what our differentiators are. Okay, I should be ready. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Fred's time is valuable. I asked him to come to this meeting to help me evaluate what you have to offer. It better be good.
I appreciate that your time is valuable. I can assure you, I have done everything possible to ensure your requirements are clearly understood.
So what do you have for us? Please be specific.
Okay. Boy, Linda sounds like difficult person today. All right, so these, I got 3 choices here. They appear in different order each time, so I got to read them carefully and figure out. Okay, so the first one says, first, we would like to confirm our understanding of your objectives and then outline what we propose. Linda, we understand you want to reduce BigCo's costs measurably and ensure environmental compliance. Fred, you share those goals plus avoid manufacturing disruption. Are we on the right track? Okay, so that one, I like it because it's basically confirming their objectives and interests. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let me look at the next one. We have partnered with Madhu to develop a tailored solution designed specifically to meet your needs. We have focused on the areas you told us you care about most: safety, environmental compliance, and reduced costs. Can we share more specifics about our approach? Okay, so I like this one. It's very reasonable. It sounds good. I like that we partnered with Madhu. It says that, so she'd be happy about that. We tailored something specific. I'm a little concerned, though, because it says safety. And even though that's one of their interests, it's not a differentiator for us. So that's something I'm concerned about on that one. Okay, let me look at the last one. We have a solution that delivers superior environmental compliance, reduced costs, and extra technical support for early adopters, all at a competitive price. With Madhu's guidance, we have tailored our solution specifically to meet your needs. Can we share the details? Okay, this one sounds really good too. I'm kind of tempted on this one. The only thing that makes me pause, I'm a little concerned about the all at a competitive price. I don't know if I want to talk about the price yet. So I tell you what, I think I'm going to go for the first one. I'm going to try this one. So first, we would like to confirm our understanding of your objectives and then outline what we propose. Linda, we understand you want to reduce BidCo's costs measurably and ensure environmental compliance. Fred, you share those goals, plus avoid manufacturing disruption. Are we on the right track? Let's see what happens.
Those are some of our requirements.
Excellent.
What specifically are you proposing?
All right. Well, they're still listening, so that's good news. I'm still in the game, so let me see what my three choices are here. All right, first one. The new product provides industry-leading compliance with environmental regulations. The new product also delivers significant fuel cost savings you can measure. And Madhu's organization will provide extra technical support to ensure you achieve these results and avoid manufacturing disruption. That one sounds pretty darn good. I like that. It says a lot of good stuff. All right, let me, it goes, yeah, that's good. Okay, let me look at the next one. With Madhu's guidance, we have tailored our solution to meet your objectives better than any competitive option. We will provide extra technical support to avoid manufacturing disruptions, and our new product will deliver measurable fuel cost savings and full environmental compliance. I really like that one. I like part of what I like there is it shows that we're better than competition. All right, the next one. We have tailored a solution for you. It includes our new product, which has industry-leading safety and environmental compliance ratings. Also, our new product will produce measurable cost savings, and our technical support will ensure you do not have any manufacturing disruption. Boy, that one's good too. So all three are really reasonable. So this is a tough choice. And I got to think about what the difference is. The first one's really good. It just kind of lays it out nicely. It basically says all the benefits, how, that, especially where they agree. That one's really good. The second one's very similar, but I love that it says, we're going to be better than competition. And the third one, it says it's a tailored solution. But again, I'm worried about safety being in there because I know that's not a differentiator. I'll tell you what, I'm going with number 2. All right, let's see what happens. So we're going to say, with Madhu's guidance, we have tailored our solution to meet your objectives better than any competitive option. We will provide extra technical support to avoid manufacturing disruptions, and our new product will deliver measurable fuel cost savings and full environmental compliance. All right, let's see how they react.
For us, not for you, to decide how your proposal compares to other proposals we've received. Your competitors have offered much better pricing than you have.
If you're going to discuss pricing, I don't think you need me. I have to get back to the plant.
Agreed.
Wait a minute, don't leave. No.
If you can't reduce your price to a level that's competitive, there's not much for us to talk about.
We understand. We'll take a look and see what we can do.
You know where to find me.
Oh no, not what I wanted.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah, good question, Madhu. I'm not too sure. So what happened? So it's not a bad outcome, but it could have been better. I got 40 out of 100. You started well by communicating to each stakeholder your understanding of their interests or objectives that you believe your solution will satisfy more effectively than competitive alternatives. Yeah, I did well, and I invited feedback. Then you declared that your solution is better than competitive alternatives, which caused the customer to challenge whether you should be making such claims. Finally, you presented your value differentiators in the least persuasive order. Play the game again and see if you can get back. Wait a minute, I need a little more feedback on this. You know what I'm going to do? I want to review my choices. I really want to understand this better. So the first response said, this is the best way to start the conversation. I communicated to each stakeholder in the meeting my understanding of their interests or objectives, that I believe our solution will satisfy more effectively than competitive alternatives. And I stated my understanding of their interests. After I did it, I asked them for if I'm on the right track, which gives them an opportunity, sure, to confirm or modify my assumptions about their interest. Okay, that's great. So I started out really well. Where did I go wrong? And it said, okay, so the second thing I did, it makes sense for you to emphasize your value differentiators, which I did. You should not declare explicitly that your solution is better than competitive alternatives unless asked directly by the customer to do so. Oh, and also you should reorder your value differentiators to communicate the value differentiators that satisfy the customer's shared critical interests first. So that would have been environmental compliance and fuel cost savings, because that they both agree on before you communicate a value differentiator, extra technical support that only satisfies one stakeholder. Shoot. Okay, well, I can do it again and get it right. So what I'm learning there is basically that it matters sort of the order, how I do things, the order in which I communicate my value differentiators, and if I slip up and say something that hurts the interest by accident, I didn't even think about it, in this case, Linda, the buyer, how it can throw me off. So again, what we're trying to do here is get the right skills and the right approach so that we're really refined and really precise in how we communicate value. Before I would restart, I could also look at key learnings. So there's going to be a whole bunch of learnings in here that I can look at after I play the game and see, what are these best practices? So first, I should confirm my understanding of each stakeholder's interests. That makes a lot of sense. Then I could avoid stakeholder aware. I can avoid stakeholder interests that my value differentiators will not satisfy. So that I did a pretty good job of that in the game. I avoided safety, for example, which I could acknowledge if they say, hey, do you guys meet safety? For sure we do, but I'm not emphasizing it in my value story. Clearly link my value differentiators to the interest satisfied, makes perfect sense. Present my best value differentiators first, so I missed that one. I didn't do that one properly. Do not overstate how your value differentiators satisfy interest. So I can go through and look at all these. If price is not a value differentiator, defer it until later. It makes perfect sense. And I can go through and get more feedback on best practices. So this is a tool we can use really to think about how to upskill our teams, how to get better and better as we work on and practice. And the beauty of this is you can do it all, obviously, in your own privacy without getting busted out in front of the customer, but it's very realistic and very engaging and kind of challenging, like real life kind of stuff when you do it. So let's go back and see where we are. One of the things, actually, let me show you. In the game, after I play the games, a bunch of the games, I can actually look at my behavioral tendencies, and I can look to see, are my choices that I make in the games when I make first choices, are they active, meaning assertive, meaning they get me to the kinds of places that are going to solve the issue, that are going to get me what I'm looking for? Are they clarifying relevant issues? Are they facilitating effective resolution? So that's assertive. Or are my choices passive, meaning they're kind of trying to avoid the issue, or maybe even trying to avoid conflict? Are my choices kind of aggressive, meaning I push a little too hard, maybe I even provoke conflict sometimes? So I can look at it in terms of different types of interactions. So let's say I want to focus on customer interactions and interactions with channel partners or external partners like Madhu in that game. So it looks like with my external channel partners, and I look at this, my choices, I made 47 of them from 26. My choices are a bit aggressive. turns out I tend to be kind of aggressive when I'm dealing with my external partners. And so that may be something, maybe I need a little coaching on that, or a little bit of work to kind of think that through, how I can be maybe more assertive, appropriately assertive, and not just aggressive. It looks like, though, with customers, I tend to be more appropriately assertive. I'm sometimes a bit aggressive, but at least I'm not very passive. So that's pretty good. And again, we can use these individually to look at ourselves and try to figure out how to improve where our strengths are, maybe where some gaps are that we want to work on. And also, as an organization, we can look at it in terms of, various people on the one hand compared to others, or compared to our group. And we can really see, where are our strengths, where are some of the gaps we might want to address. It can be really, really powerful way to get us to be a little bit more precise about when we coach our people, when we decide what resources we want to use to kind of focus on areas that we know are going to generate results for ourselves. It gives us a lot of real-time, incredibly powerful data to understand where those strengths and gaps might be. So basically, what we want to do is we want to make sure at the end of the day that our teams and our individuals, our professionals, are really telling compelling value stories. And what makes those value stories compelling is we're taking specific elements of our solution, again, the value differentiators, and we're linking them to the business objectives of the targeted customers, those specific customers, and the interests of the stakeholders within that customer. So the different people we're going to encounter, whether it's purchasing, the buyer, whether it's operations people, whether it's senior leaders, whether it's engineers. And what we want to do is make sure that everything we do, we're focusing on those pain points, those targeted interests and objectives, and showing how our value differentiators will satisfy those interests and resolve those pain points. Now, we want to do it, as Brian was showing you, with tools, with communication strategies that speak to them in their language. So if they want to see, sort of how we get there, we want to be as open and transparent as possible in how we do it. If they have their own models, maybe we take some of our data, plug it into their models if they're willing to share. A lot won't share, but we can at least create models that we think are credible and are compelling. We got to have the skills, the relevant facts and data, and then the skills to have these conversations so that, when we get the pushback, we can handle the objections, we can influence them, we can get to the right people. And ultimately, what our value stories have to do is they have to get the customer stakeholders to take action. That's what this is all about, getting them to make decisions, the decisions that result in favorable choices for us. So this is really what we're trying to focus on in communicating value. When we do it, we're basically being very focused on the skills that our people need to have so that we're actually communicating value in ways that customers can understand and respond. We want to have the right tools so that we're credible when we're sharing financial data and modeling, so that we can have an engaging back and forth with the customer about the assumptions, about the right numbers, about the value, the financial value that we believe we can deliver. And, in the case of this game-based training, whether it's game-based or other scenarios or ways you have to do it, you've got to engage your sales professionals in a bit of trial and error, have them talk about it, have them practice before they go out there, because every single opportunity you get to engage, especially these days with our customers, you want to be on, you want to be precise, you want to be targeted, you want to make sure that we're communicating both to the business objectives and interests of the customer and with the right differentiators that really show how we satisfy those interests and objectives better than competition. So we want to be precise in how we communicate it. We want to be focused and where some of our people, because they're not all going to be equally skilled, they're not all going to be equally experienced or comfortable, we can use data actually, especially with these games, to see where their tendencies are, where their strengths are, and coach them and help them and bring them along to the place where we need them to be. So this is really the key to communicating value effectively. I do encourage you to look at the variety of resources available, and I'm going to turn it back over to Nick because I would really love to hear your questions and answer anything at all that you have that's of interest to you around this this very challenging and important area that I think we can all continue to improve and really drive a lot of value for our organizations overall. So Nick, I turn it back to you. If there's any questions, I'm really interested in hearing them.
Great, and I do see some questions popping in. So thank you, John. Thank you, Brian, for sharing. So as I said, we have a few questions coming in, and just a quick reminder, there's still time to enter it on the right-hand panel on your screen. And while you're entering, just another quick reminder, please take this 10-second survey when you exit today's webinar. You'll be entered into the raffle to win a copy of Dollar Housing Differentiation Value. And we always get a bunch of questions. As John said, we're going to record the webinar. We're going to send the slides out. Usually it takes a business day or two, but we'll get them into your inbox. But we'll look at this one to start. So I think we're talking about the slide earlier in the presentation of common problems, so lack of tools, lack of skills, etc. Which ones do you find tend to come across most often, and which ones are hardest and easiest to solve?
Okay, so you're talking about common challenges, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the ones that, what I find the most common challenge that really sends us in the wrong direction is we emphasize our products and services more so than the value differentiators that link to the actual stakeholder interests and objectives. So why do we do this? Because we're comfortable with it. We're excited about it. We understand our products and services. We believe in our products and services. We often get trained really well on our products and services, and our sales professionals can quickly slip into that. So what I find is really, really key there is even when we're doing our training with our sales organization on our products and services, always linking the different elements, aspects, attributes of the products and services back to two things: the customer objectives and stakeholder interests that they satisfy, number one, and secondly, which ones are our true value differentiators that we want to be able to really emphasize for value communication, for communicating value. So again, that's the number one thing I come across. I also do find that there are, especially if we have a range of skills within the organization, there may be different levels of comfort in basically how to communicate this stuff effectively. Some people just do it really well intuitively, and others really need some guidance and some support in how to do it. So that's another thing I find, and depending on the size of the organization and our ability to coach and identify these differences, sometimes we don't necessarily support people in the ways we could. The last thing I would say is, sometimes we get stuck, right? We get blocked by buyers or others at a customer where we really feel like we're not able to communicate value to other stakeholders within the customer. And that's a real challenge that comes up quite a bit. And there, there's a lot of different strategies for dealing with that. But a lot of it has to do with understanding, first and foremost, the interests of the buyer who may be blocking you in terms of protecting or managing their internal relationships. So if we can find ways to show that we respect those relationships and can help the buyer show value internally in their organization, it's far more likely they're willing to partner with us to start connecting with some of those other stakeholders in their organization. But those are very good questions. I hope that answered it. Those are some of the key ones that I really see very often.
Great. So here's an interesting one. When a buyer is less focused on overall value, how can you shift the conversation to one where it's more, aligned around a value vision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what you're going to find, especially with professional purchasing organizations and professional buyers who have been trained, is they will either, intentionally sort of kind of divert the value conversation and transfer it into more of a leverage conversation where they're going to try to get all the value but not acknowledge that it's real value and say basically, yeah, we know we get that anyways. What's the big deal? And then try to fight you on price. So that's one situation that you come across very often. Another one is where literally the person you're dealing with just does not see the value. It could be that they're new in their position and they don't get it. They lack the business acumen. It could be that their metrics are very different, so that basically they're measured on very narrow sense of a very narrow piece of the value, and they want to ignore the rest of it. That's, again, very, very common, especially with purchasing organizations. The key that I've found is, first of all, if you just try to fight it and go around them, it's usually high risk. I mean, if they find out, they get upset, you damage relationships. The best approach that I've found is figure out what interests could be professional or personal of that person you're dealing with really are largely driving a lot of their behavior, and acknowledge those interests directly if appropriate, and look for ways to satisfy those interests. So it could be something as simple as the person's super busy and they don't have much time. So I'm going to focus on being very quick and concise and to the point and say, hey, could I have just 5 minutes? And in that 5 minutes, I'm going to make sure I show them how I can satisfy some of their interests and also potentially interests of others in the organization. So I've got to, instead of just, saying, hey, I've got a great value proposition, or we're going to create a lot of value for your organization, or here's some numbers that we want you to look at, focus specifically on an identifiable critical interest of that stakeholder you're dealing with, and that will usually get their attention and then open the conversation to that broader value conversation. So again, it's finding a hook, finding some way to get to that person so that they say, oh, yeah, I could listen for a minute. And the moment you've got their attention, that's when you want to make sure, again, you're going directly with your best stuff first for them. The value drivers, they're going to satisfy as many of their critical interests as possible because they're starting to listen. It doesn't mean that they're going to say yes immediately, but you've now started a conversation that can evolve and continue and turn more broadly into a value conversation. So that's what I found. Is that helpful? Is that address sort of asking, Nick?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Here's an interesting one. So, and let me just pull it up. How many value differentiators are good enough to create a good, compelling story? In this case, this would be for one particular customer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So first of all, you don't want to just overwhelm them with, dozens of value differentiators. It's not credible. It's not realistic. They're not going to respond. The way I would say is the precise answer is as many value differentiators as you need to satisfy their critical interests better than competition, so they get it, so they see it, they perceive it, and they make the decision. That's the actual correct answer. As a practical matter, when I've worked with various sales organizations, what I've found is you're generally looking for between 3 and 5 value differentiators. Why do you need at least 3 to 5? Because it's almost always, unless you're selling to just one person who's a sole proprietor in any more complex B2B environment, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have multiple stakeholders on their side who are probably going to have some interests in common, we certainly hope, and a few interests that are different. So you may need 1 or 2 value differentiators that speak directly to one stakeholder's interests, even if others aren't so interested. So in that game we just played, and even in the example Brian shared, I think you may recall that extra technical support was actually a critical value differentiator because it satisfied the interests of the operations guy who's worried about, having operational difficulties or change if he goes with our new product. But it turns out, the purchasing person probably isn't very excited about that at all. Maybe she's even wondering, oh, am I going to have to pay extra for that? Linda, she doesn't want that. So you're going to need enough, usually 3 to 5, to satisfy some of the big ones, but also a couple little ones in there that you might need for certain stakeholders. And you always want to be listening to see, are there new stakeholder interests coming up that then make you realize, oh, wait a minute, we do have another value differentiator that I could bring to play in this situation. And remember, you always want to be specific to the targeted customer opportunity. So even if we have, let's say, 5 to 10 total that we're pretty comfortable with, probably for a specific customer, it's going to be closer to that 3 to 5 that you really want to be very, very credible with. Great question. Really good one.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more, so we'll go with this one. In a competitive scenario, how can you convey your value story if your stakeholder prioritizes something that is better suited to your competitor?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So first of all, sometimes you're not going to win them all. There are situations, and sometimes your value differentiators in your analysis will tell you that this prospect is not the best opportunity. So one of the most powerful and important things as a sales leader is to communicate clearly to our teams that, don't just keep, knocking and pounding at the door trying to get in where we don't have a credible offering that's better than competition. Now, most of the time, obviously, we believe we will have, a very competitive offering and, in fact, be able to beat competition in many situations. So other than the situation where, it's just the weird one, like I actually had one situation where the sales organization we had, the team I was working with had a great offering, but it turned out that the buyer was related to somebody who was married to somebody who worked for a competitor. And they were just for that reason going to go with a competitor. In that situation, we actually shared a cautionary tale, which was, okay, we get it. We understand you're making a decision on that basis. That's their value as they see it. But we showed them that it was going to cost them a lot of money and this promised savings weren't going to happen. And what actually happened in that situation is they listened to the cautionary tale. They preserved the opportunity to come back to us, and they did come back later. So one thing is to be able to say, hey, you think that the competitor's better. We disagree. Here's our data. You have your data. Let's talk about it. But just be aware that somebody else similarly situated, another company that we've dealt with, another customer of ours had made this choice previously. Here's what they experienced. And again, you don't have to be specific about who the customer is. I mean, probably you won't, right? You don't want to share that information, wouldn't be appropriate. But the ability to share information, engage in this dialogue about how you believe your differentiators are in fact in total more effectively satisfying the other side's interests, that's what you want to focus on. So finally, you may have other stakeholders in that organization who see it your way. Maybe the engineering people totally agree with us and they don't agree with the direction purchasing has been taken. So there are a lot of different ways to get there, but it's clearly about listening carefully, being very, very specific about what our value differentiators are, and engaging in a dialogue that may not always win the day today, but over time, in my experience, consistently will keep bringing people back to you because they realize, number one, you understand their interests and their objectives, and number two, you do have an offering that's going to bring them certain very, very powerful benefits. Maybe they recalculate as they keep listening and keep investigating and evaluating. Don't expect to always win every single one of them in the first interaction, but be consistent. That's the key. You want your sales team to be completely consistent. It's a great, great question.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was. So that's all the time we have today for questions. We'll reach out to those individually who we didn't get to. Before you go, just a quick reminder to pre-register for next month's webinar during the exit survey. We'll be joined by Steve Laborda, and he'll be sharing strategies for getting your value pricing into the DNA of your organization through value selling. You don't want to miss this one, so make sure you pre-register in the exit survey. And for those of us, and that's it for us today from Leverage Point. I really want to thank a special thank you to John and Brian for presenting. And from all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.